Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Katie Mowry. I'm the Event Marketing Manager for Utopia Global, and I will be moderating today's webinar, Transitioning to SAP Fashion Management, Preparing for Your Digital Transformation with MDG for RFM. Today's presenter is Martin Prince, Solutions Director for Retail and Fashion at Utopia Global. Martin has over 15 years of SAP hands-on and business process experience working across organizations both in the US and internationally with a focus on the retail industry. This presentation will be 25 minutes long, followed by a Q&A. Please enter your questions in the question box anytime throughout the presentation, and I'll collect them. We'll be recording today's session, and the link and presentation will be emailed to you and will be available on our website, utopiainc.com. And with that, let's welcome Martin Prince.
Thank you, Katie, for the fabulous introduction. We'll talk about we're going to talk about the transformation from AFS to FMS. So, what is the driver in fashion today? Well, it's four critical forces or four key components: globalization, faster fashion, customer experience, and vertically integrated channels. So in globalization is that we see clients going global. We are removing the regional component, and everybody wants to be everywhere. So that also means that you're introducing to new markets. And new markets is not only opening new stores, for example, or selling to wholesalers. It's also being in multiple channels. And of course, there's a sustainable component that has been created the last years, that you have to act in a sustainable manner as well. Everything is running faster, including fashion. That means shorter seasons for the styles, more introductions, things about fast fashion, where you do not have the traditional seasons, but you can constantly introduce new products and styles to keep your stores and your websites fresh. You have concurrent seasons in if you are in the northern and the southern hemisphere, and you have to think local and act global, right? Think global and act local. So you have to think in your global market you're in, but you also are a global player. The customer experience is that consumers want the seamless integration. They want to see something on the phone, or for example, on my do-it-yourself shop, when if I need something, I basically put it into my wish list and I go down to the store and know exactly where it is, or I could order it online and have it delivered to store. And all those combinations, customers want to have a seamless integration and have that executed well. And that includes tablets, it includes smartphones, and you have multiple touch points, and it's very important that your data are in sync to manage this. We see manufacturers going into the retail for increased revenue, but we also see retailers going into wholesale to control their brand image. Think about private labels from your supermarket, for example, in the United States. There are some very big, in the United States, there are some very big supermarket chains that run different brands, and they have their private labels in the different banners and the different markets. Now, earlier on, when SAP introduced AFS and IS Retail, these were running on two different separate systems. You had an SAP Apparel Footware Solution, and you had the Retail Solution. And they would have their own two set of master data across the two different systems. And as you see on this screen here, and it is not really, I don't want to go into too much detail, but what it really explains very well, it is that you have the two systems, and you have like a few bridges, like over a river, where you exchange data. And the clients I have been involved in were struggling with this between the two systems and getting that to work seamlessly. And I don't think that was the intention necessarily of this picture, but the users actually felt very separated in the two systems as they are showing on this illustration. So SAP introduced the FMS, the Fashion and the Fashion Solution, Fashion Management Solution, where they integrate the two systems into one, merge them into one. It is based on the IS Retail, or SAP Merchandising for Retail, as it is now called, and you have added the AFS functionality, like with the A-run, with the segmentation, the seasonality, and international sizing. All this is now being added into one box, the SAP FMS solution. And with that, you have the retail component, you have the wholesale component, and you have the manufacturing component, all integrated into FMS. And this puts higher demand on the article master, in the sense that you have to have your data being ready for manufacturing. To get your data ready, they may be sitting there for wholesale and retail towards the end. So you may actually have, if you don't have your data under control, you may actually have data that are sitting that are incorrect, and you do not discover until months after the article is being produced, because that's when it's introduced in the store, right? The longer in the supply chain or the value chain that you have an error sitting in an article master, or in any master for that matter's sake, the higher the cost is to correct that item. So if you can get all your mistakes and all the bugs and all the duplicates ironed out up front, you have a much leaner process, you have a much more efficient process, and you reduces your costs accordingly. Now, for those of you who may be new to master data governance, it is the key element here is to govern your master data. So SAP MDG is a state-of-the-art master data management solution that provides out-of-the-box, domain-specific master data governance to centrally create, change, and distribute data. So what that means is that MDG can take data from different systems. It funnels it through workflows and processes that streamline the data, that make sure that data are actually being correct for the different processes that they are. So if you're a retailer, for example, and you have a DC, you may have the logistics of the DC department actually review the data for the DC. Now, if the process is a direct store delivery or DSD process, that is not necessarily. There may be other players in play, and all that is being processed in the governance system, making sure that the right people approve it. It provides a consistency of data throughout the supply chain, and it's consolidating the solution of records. So we have one system that centrally administers the master data, and you can check for duplicates, etc., and you make sure that everything is being fed from one point to the recipient systems. You have integration. Of the data model in SAP, and you have the flexibility of, for example, extending the data model. I have not been to a client that have not had C fields, some are more than others, of course, but all that is being accommodated in MDG as well. And all this with MDG, with Data Steward and Information Steward, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, it brings you a very powerful platform for driving up your data quality. The key element from a master data governance framework is to get your data clean, stay clean. Utopia has for many years actually been supplying services for getting data clean, and then they would get messy, and we would come back and we would get them clean again. So we were looking into the stay clean component of it. Now the get clean SAP Data Services is a good tool for that. It helps you to cleanse your data, standardize your data, and it runs a duplicate check. In addition to that, it is actually a powerful ETL system, ETL platform, and it also has a quality component to it. Now on the stay clean, the SAP Information Steward is a valuable product which helps you to visualize, analyze, and control your data quality. I think that is a key element for Data Information Steward is that data quality is something that is not for the business easy to comprehend, or it becomes very technical very quickly. SAP Information Steward conveys that information in a very easy to read manner and easy to read dashboards. That helps actually to engage the business in helps the business getting the business engaged in master data quality and master data governance. And that actually drives me to the MDG RFM solution, where you have the system to collaborate and eliminate silos. So think about the solution that I had before with the DC versus the DSD deliveries, that you make sure that the logistics department is involved, but only for the processes for which they're relevant. You adhere to company standards on your quality. You can integrate with your external vendors, and you have a governance rigidity. So that means that there's no shortcuts in the system. You have to go through these steps in order to get your article approved or changed or created, or whatever the process is. All this is founded on complete transparency. You can go in for any transaction to see who changed what and when. And if you're making a change, not a create, the system actually standards will tell you, well, why did you want to do this change, or why did you do the change? So it's not just a value from an ABC indicator from A to B. You have to explain why, because of sales numbers, etc., etc. Now, the master data governance actually serves two purposes. It consolidates data from various decentralized sources, and it also streamlines data processes to the recipient systems. So in many cases, you actually get data from various systems. It could be third-party systems, for example, data clouds. It could be from vendor portals. It could be from other SAP systems. You take those data and consolidate those data into SAP MDG, and you streamline the processes and the data so it has a uniform format, and it has been through a uniform process in the governance model. And that means that the data who needs those systems are actually getting the data that they need. They're not necessarily flooded with 500 fields. They may only get the 450 fields that are required. And that works on-premise as well as cloud applications. It could be sent to third-party systems. And regarding the third-party systems, they may actually have data that are not required in SAP, and you can, in SAP MDG, store that data that are not required for SAP, and you don't have to pollute your data in your live SAP system with data that are required for a third-party system, as an example. It all stays in MDG, and is sent specifically to the third-party system. The transformation from AFS to FMS is key is very well, perhaps the biggest change is in the article master, where the article master in AFS was based on the grid system, and in retail and FMS it is based on the generic variants. That means also that it's a structure to a more standard architecture that SAP uses in other systems. So, for example, on the sales order in AFS, you would at the schedule line level have the style level. That is not the case in FMS and merchandising for resale, where a style, as you see here in red, will actually be an article in its own right, with a link back to the generic article, or also known in retail as the master SKU. Now, this is a pretty complex transition from AFS into FMS, so it's not something that could be done by an upgrade that we normally do. You actually have to do a transition from AFS into FMS, and for that, SAP has developed the DTMT tool for that transition. There's here a view of the environment that you do for the migration. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but essentially what it is that you, in very short, take an abstract from your AFS system, and also an abstract from your FMS system on your configuration, and then you start merging the data together and clean out and run load tests and actually see that things are working, and you hash them out. So that will be an additional extension to your data migration, and of course also a bit more complicated than if you just transition into a normal system. But this tool is actually quite comprehensive. It will automatically detect if you have like Z fields or Z fields for those in outside United States. and extension to the data models. So it's quite a comprehensive tool, but of course all this depends on the amount of customization the individual client may have. So where does SAP Master Data Governance play a role in the S4 transition? Since the deployment has to be along with the S4 deployment. And we get to the get clean, stay clean in a little bit. But actually, as part of your migration, you will clean your data in AFS. Now, when you turn on the live FMS system, you will actually already have a process in place for bringing in new articles. So that means that you're actually building on the clean master articles that you have implemented, you have imported from FMS. So that means that articles will be faster introduced, time to value, by deploying the MDG functionality, because you have a streamlined process. It is very important to remember that just because you run master data governance doesn't mean that it needs to run slow. That's where the workflow gets into place, and you customize your workflow to the exact same process. It also means that as functionality will be rolled out in FMS or on the S4HANA application, you can actually switch data from the feeding systems into the recipient systems. Now, because not all functionality may be there, that they may actually have it may actually support the possibility of having bidirectional systems from FMS actually back to the feeding systems. It could also be, for example, like a cost component or cost calculation that could be fed. We see from a testing point of view actually a significant reduction between 10 to 20% reduction in the testing cycles, simply because that the data, the quality of the data is there, and you don't have to worry about that in your testing, and you can focus on functionality. I kind of broke my own thunder here a little while back. So what do we actually need to do in the transitioning from FMS from AFS into FMS? Sorry. Now, before you even start the migration in AFS, right? You would have to do due diligence on your master data. You have to go through duplicate checks. You have to check for inconsistencies. You may want to consider archiving of old data that you didn't do earlier, right? You run your data through your data transportation migration tool, DTMT tool, and import it into FMS. So now you would have actually data that are in a very good shape in FMS. Now, bear in mind, again, you could still have your check for data using Information Steward on the FMS S4 platform, and check your data that you migrated are actually par to what you expect. Now, going forward, of course, you may recognize these bullet points comes from the governance, where it actually have your you actually have your collaboration in place for new article introduction, governance rigidity, and of course the transparency, as we talked about earlier. So you have a cleanup. You actually have a get clean component in AFS, and you have a stay clean component supported by master data governance and also information steward and data services on the live FMS system. So what is a typical flow in master data governance? You see we have 4 boxes here, actually 5, but the 4 main ones are maintain, validate, approve, and replicate. So data will come in maintenance, and that could be somebody manually create a change request. So it's very similar to an MM41 or create an article in your ERP system or your FMS system. You create a change request in the MDG system, and it looks and feels the same. It is just a change request, and I'll get to that in a little bit. It could also come from data pools. It could come from your PLM system. It could come from vendor portals, etc. The second step is the validations, and that would, of course, since it's being inherent to SAP, you get all the standard SAP validations. Are the merchandise category, does that exist? Does the sales organization exist, etc., etc. In addition to that, you can actually have your validation on your business rules. So they could be, an example of that could be, for example, the purchasing group, where many clients use that as the buyer. Now, a mature organization, a big organization, will have hundreds of buyers. You could actually use your merchandise category to say, if I'm having a certain category like men's tops, I should only see from the drop down the buyers for men's tops, as an example. And you can also have external services like a call to an external vendor to do validation. For example, works that could do a risk assessment on let's say toys, on if they got batteries. Step number 3 is you move into the approval process after the validations, and this is where certain people need to validate or approve or enrich the data. So there may be data that have to be manually put in, and that could, for example, be your purchase price, as an example, right? It goes through these processes, and then it replicates to the recipient systems when the last approval is done. That could be to the SAP IS Retail or SAP Merchandising for Retail, or other systems that are your FMS system actually, or other third-party systems. Now, the key element here is that the first 3 steps, the maintain, validate, and approve, are actually in the staging area. So whatever happens in that process stays in MDG. It will not clutter your data in your live system. So if the last approver actually rejects and tells, we have decided not to carry this article, we'll roll it back, and it will stay in MDG and will be discontinued. The change request will be discontinued. Now, everything happens as a change request. It looks and feels like an article, but it is a change request, and that actually allows us to play in the staging area. Not only until the final approval has happened, the system will replicate into the live systems, and you can actually start using the article. So that's a very powerful tool in MDG that helps reducing the clutter in your live system. Some of my clients actually have a solution where you, for example, have data pools, or you're feeding from a PLM system into your live system, and then decide that you don't want to carry it anyway. And then there's only one way to get it out, and that is the SAP archiving process, right? So this reduces the clutter in your system. Once you get to your system, then you can do additional enrichments in your local system. So, for example, if you have a web presence and need to put more structured data to be presenting online. So, the solution for MDG RFM. I'm not even sure if I told what RFM is. You kind of get indoctrinated by the words. RFM means Retail and Fashion Management. So my apology if I did not mention that earlier. We have focused on the biggest pain point for retailers, and that is the article master. The article master for retailers, and we can handle the characteristics. We can handle characteristics like the variant generating, as well as the information as well as the information only characteristics. We handle the generic variants requirements, as well as the structured articles like the displays, pre-packs, and gift sets. We have, of course, extended this to SAP-enabled functionality like the segmentation, like seasonality, and international sizing and handling. And all of this has been, on top of that, we have added some upload capabilities, so you don't necessarily have to create one at a time, but you can upload, and you can then also mass process your change requests in a cockpit-style screen. So Utopia's offerings is that we have developed the Retail for Fashion Management Solutions, or the SAP RFM Solution, and that is on SAP's price lists. I would like to emphasize that the prerequisite for that is SAP Merchandising for Retail or SAP Fashion Management, or FMS. We do not apply the solution on other platforms for RFM. In addition to that, we also do the implementation services for the RFM solution. We also have partners that does that, but we also can assist doing that ourselves. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have actually started in the data migration part earlier, Utopia has, and we do data migration, data profiling to see what is the what is the quality of your data that you actually have, and we can support with data strategy services for our clients. And that actually leads us to questions, so I think that is back to you, Katie.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So we have 2 questions right now. One of them is, can MDG RFM be applied later after the FMS implementation is live?
Yes, you can absolutely do that. You just have to bear in mind that, let's say that you implement MDG, let's say 6 months after you're live. You have already generated data that may not be of proper quality. But yes, you can absolutely do that. Information Steward and data services may actually help you in monitoring on a not a proactive but a reactive mode, where you can actually build scripts in your Information Steward system to check against certain fields. And then at a later point, you can apply your MDG RFM solution.
All right. And the second question is, our company is using a product lifecycle management PLM. Where does MDG for RFM play in an environment with PLM and FMS?
That's a good question. You would actually use the PLM system to feed into MDG RFM. So as the article, as the item matures in your PLM system to a certain point, you will drop a file to RFM, right? And in RFM, you would mature the article and enrich the article for SAP in all your third-party systems. So instead of manually keying in the data, you would simply have data being fed from the PLM system. Now, when you do that, there are certain data that will be owned by the PLM systems. There are certain data that would be owned by the MDG RFM system. So you have to have a discussion or an analysis of how do you want to handle those data. Let's just take article description as an example. Now, if you see in RFM the article description is incorrect, do you want to change that in RFM, or should you go back and ask the PLM system to correct the description for that article? But PLM would feed into RFM, that would then again feed into your live FMS system and all other recipient systems.
Okay. And with that, it looks like there's no more questions. If you do have a question following this webinar, please email them to me. You can email them to Katie Mowery, KMOWERY, @utopiainc.com. My email is up on the screen. Future webinar topics and past recordings will be available on our website, utopiainc.com. I'd like to thank you all for joining today's webinar.
Thank you, Katie.